Wow, that was cool. How you guys doing? I want to apologize first off. I got to Oslo and then went to sleep. No phones, please. I'm just kidding. Went to sleep and then I woke up immediately with like some sort of illness that I don't know the name to. I'm gonna liken it to like death. So I was basically experiencing death for the last like 2 or 3 days in my hotel room, and this is the first time I've gotten out of my hotel room. So I'm very excited about that. Which could be great for you. If I die on stage, then this will be a conference you'll never forget. So first, I just have a story to tell you. And this story begins with four founders. And these four founders are in a coffee shop, or in a bar, a restaurant, plane, wherever the case may be, they're somewhere. And the point is that, I mean, they had no office. They had no physical presence where they could go meet and work on this company that they founded. And two of them had other full-time jobs where they had to bring in the bacon and concentrate on that job full-time. And on top of that, all these founders like to talk. They like to travel. They like to go all over the place. So they weren't even in the same city, much less the same neighborhood or anything like that. All of that was the start of GitHub. And from the beginning, we were forced to be really distributed because everyone was all over the place. We were supposed to be very flexible because they wouldn't have done this if they couldn't come up with a really flexible way of doing it. And we were supposed to be very happy because they would not have done all this stuff and jumped through all this hoop unless they were really happy doing it. Turns out this is a really great way to work. And this is how we've worked ever since then. This talk is kind of about GitHub because I like seeing examples of how people work. But this talk is much more about improving your own company. I think this will work from anyone from the size of one person to 10,000. There's always some level that you have personal change on. Your team, how can you change your team even if you're a low-level employee to some CEO? I think that's really important to try and figure out how you can make better choices on how you can work better. So, I'm Zach Holman. I'm Holman on Twitter, Holman on GitHub, and I do work for GitHub. It's a cute little company. If you guys don't know, we are the largest Git host online. We are also the largest Subversion host because we host Subversion for all of our repositories. So we are the largest code host online. And all of this talk sort of stemmed from this three-part series I did last year called How GitHub Works. So if you're interested in reading stuff instead, you can get up and ignore my talk completely and read it. But if you want to hear me talk, that's cool. And I'll start talking now. And I first want to talk about hours. And I think hours are kind of bullshit. In other words, like this whole concept of a 9-to-5 day is really horrible for our industry. You go way back when where you have to drag yourself to work at a particular time, then leave at a particular time. That may work for other places, but for us, I don't think that really works. And I think it's harmful to think that it does. Crafting code is a really creative endeavor. We like to think that code is very logical, it's very straightforward, and you just have to puzzle it out, and that's not the case. A lot of times you just have to sit down and really figure out what is the creative approach to this where I can come up with the most efficient code, the most crafty code, and the best code that will last into the future. And that doesn't really happen if you're just sitting down and forcing yourself to fix a problem. You can't force creativity to happen during any sort of normal work hours. It sort of happens when you're best prepared to address your creativity. So for us, I think the best solutions happen when you're in the zone. Whatever you want to define that is, anytime you can sort of sit down and say, yeah, I'm totally in the zone. Code is sort of flowing from my fingertips. I'm doing really good decisions here. That's where I want to be every time. And it's really hard to sort of force that to happen at a certain point. So our office is filled with lots of different people. It's filled with early birds who get in the office at like 7 in the morning, allegedly. I don't see them because I definitely don't get in the morning that early. Night owls, more like me. I'll stay later into the night because that's when I work better. 9-to-5ers because that works better for their scheduler. Lots of international employees. We have people all over the place. And then people like what I'm doing right now, traveling employees. So between all of these, we don't really have a set office hour. And I think that's really important because we're able to embrace flexibility. We're able to embrace what somebody thinks is their concept of a really good way of working. A couple years ago, we made these shirts called 90 Hours a Week and Loving It, like Apple did back. I'm totally just kidding. We did not make these shirts. I think this is horrible. I think that our industry likes to say that, like, yeah, I worked overnight last night, and this is great. And I think that's horrible. I think it's a badge of foolishness for people to say that, like, yeah, our team came together and did thousands of hours last month. It doesn't make any sense to me. I've done all the all-nighters at different companies. I've done the long hours. I've done all that stuff, and it's almost always a bad idea. I come back from it, and I realize that it's totally drained me mentally. The code I produce is much worse, and it impacts future code because now you have this code that you've written, and you think that it's okay, but you don't want to take it out and refactor it because you'll never get to the point where you want to refactor that stuff, and it's horrible. It comes to a much more bad situation to be in. So that's sort of the crux of what we end up doing. We let people who work at GitHub work wherever they want and whenever they want. Because again, we want to get people to that zone in their minds where they're really creative, where they're really productive. And that's what we care about much less than core hours or anything like that. Because we just want to get the best work out of employees. That should be what you're looking at more than anything else that you do. That happens when they're happy, that happens when they're fresh, and that happens when they're creative. And everything I'm going to talk about today sort of attacks that sentence. Like, how many things can we do to support that? How many things can we do to come out of that? Alongside that, especially on the happy side of things, there's something that most of our industry tends to forget, and that's families. I don't understand why people forget this. GitHub is no different. We have tons of different families. We have tons of different kids, which is kind of awesome at this point. John Maddox a couple weeks ago had a kid. He's now a new dad. Tom Preston Warner, our founder, is going to have his first kid. Paul over there in the audience who spoke yesterday is going to have his kid later this year. Beth just announced that she's going to have hers. The point I'm saying about this is that it's good to embrace this sort of stuff. It's good to realize that people have lives outside of work. This is probably my favorite slide I've ever done because this is the whole GitHub family. I can embrace these people because they're all like sort of my kids. They're all the people I like to hang out with outside of work because it's good. It's good to realize that people have lives outside of work because if you help them support that, they're going to do better code for you. They're going to come back to work really happy. They're come back to work really jazzed up to do that. So that's what I would say. Be a family company. That helps out people who are not even, who may be single, who may not have families of their own, because being family friendly lets you try a lot of different things out. You can be much less hour-centric. You don't have to worry about coming to work at certain hours. You can let people be flexible around their own hours and so on. And I really think that happy coworkers mean really for productive companies. If you let people work on their own lives just as much as they work on their company, that's just going to end up being so much better for you. All this depends on a lot of trust, though. And I think you really have to trust your employees to sort of have all this power amongst their own decisions and destiny. And I think that's fine because you hired these people. The number of times there were, you'll go through weeks of interviews and stuff with a company, and then they throw all this like management stuff on top of you. It doesn't make any sense. It's like they trust you to hire you and pay you money, but then they put all these micromanagements on top of you where you can't, you have to come into work and come to all these meetings and stuff like that. I think that's really hostile. So basically you have to trust your employees, help them out if they're running into any problems or anything like that, and then verify they're doing work. Just every now and then check in, make sure that they're running into no problems, or if there is something, fix it. And that basically just requires communication. We do a lot of this stuff. We talk to people, try and figure out what's preventing you from shipping this feature. Is there anything that's a problem? Do you have any time constraints? Anything like that. And all you have to do is just add that communication. It goes a really long way. So in general, I think hours are bullshit. I think it's really hostile to think that our industry, for some reason, just thinks that if you throw hours at a problem, it's going to be a good thing. I don't think it is at all. Okay. I always want to talk about being asynchronous as well. And this is sort of my favorite part about GitHub. And I think this is what makes GitHub a lot different from other companies. Asynchronous, in other words, just means a distributed way of getting things done. And we do that in a number of different ways at GitHub. One is we're very geographically distributed. 2, we're very attention aware. 3, we're very team oriented. And 4, we have very minimal process. And I'll get into each one of these individually. First of all, the geographically aware. GitHub is sort of headquartered in San Francisco. I finally looked at the numbers, and we're about half and half. People in San Francisco versus people in the rest of America, the rest of Europe, Australia, Asia. We're sort of all over the place at this point. And that's because it turns out the world's bigger than San Francisco. It would be great if you could hire everybody in your city and not have to look outside your little zone, but that's never going to happen. And that's great because we want to hire the best. And we don't have to worry about who happens to be down the street or who happens to be in our country. We can look anywhere in the world and figure out who we want to hire. So with that under consideration, distributed work really needs to be a priority for us. We have to set up our company in order to work really well distributedly, so we can attract these people across the world and make them feel comfortable even though they may not be in the office with us every single day. Part of that is helped because of our flexible hours. Since we have no core work hours, you can sort of see work as being done at all times. When America's sleeping, all of our European staff is sort of going hard at work, or just talking, chatting, having social activity, whatever the case may be. There's always something happening now, and that's sort of been at the forefront of how we build our company for a long time. We're able to do this for a lot of different reasons. In general, we try to limit our in-person required contact. What do I mean by that? We do everything through chat. And I mean, if we're working on the same problem, in the same city, in the same office, on the same table, I'm still going to talk to you over chat rather than talk to you in person. Because one, that gets people across the world involved in our conversation. So if we're on some topic of area that somebody in Europe has said, yeah, I've spent years on this, let me tell you my expertise on this, they would not have realized that we were talking about this if we were just talking about it over beers in San Francisco. And then two, this means that everything is logged. So 3 months from now, we can say, yeah, we discussed this a while back, what did we talk about? And you can just pull up the transcript. That's incredibly important. So you can search through all the stuff that you talked about and have that physical log there ready for you to check out at any time. So we pipe everything through chat. And I'll talk about this a little bit more in the future. We've also been playing around with a few things. One of these is Beer 30, which is sort of a weekly meeting we have at GitHub. It's sort of a stand-up meeting, 4:30, have a beer, and then usually the founders come out and talk about, wherever the case may be. Sometimes financial stuff, sometimes hiring, really big company, big picture stuff. And the important thing about this is that we live stream it so remote employees can see it in real time and ask questions and feel like they are participating just as they were if they stood right next to them. Then we also record this as well. So if you happen to miss the live stream, you can just download it and you can see exactly what happened, even though you weren't there present. Alongside that, we use like FaceTime and Skype and a lot of this stuff. This is our situation room in the office. We've got like a nice table. We got clocks on the wall because like clocks are important, I guess. There's a red phone there in case we want to like nuke somebody, I guess. So really important stuff. But we also have a bunch of iPads hooked up in there so you can FaceTime, put yourself on the TV. And this is really important if you were trying to feel somebody out for like an interview and we don't want to fly them in quite yet. And we want to sort of get a feel for how they are in person. So that's really good. So in the cases where you do want to sort of get a face-to-face experience, there are lots of obvious technical ways to do this. And then about once a week, we have a bunch of recorded talks at GitHub. Sometimes internal. If somebody's really excited about what they're working on or some new technology they're working on, they'll get up and talk in front of everyone else. Sometimes we'll have other startups or other companies come in and talk about their product or something they're interesting they're working on. We had a couple PhD students come in and talk about their work, just as sort of a fun way to sort of broaden everyone's horizons. The cool thing about this is that this is hooked up to, it's an Arduino-based, Connect-based motion tracking automatic recording system, sort of. So like I can be up here on stage and then like I've been told if I walk this far the camera can't see me. That's not the case in our office. The camera will track you on the Connect, and then when you're done, that will get uploaded and then compressed and then delivered to our Talks website, all automatically because somebody was too lazy to press the record button and save. So that's really cool. And then even though you're not in the office, you can see everything that happened through this talk wherever you are. So I've been sort of saying I hate humans, which is somewhat the case, but it's not totally the case because I think it's really important to encourage this sort of structured team building from time to time. And we try to do this about twice a year, and then a couple other times we'll send people who are remote into the office just to meet people and get some actual face-to-face time because it completely changes the game. This is 2010. We had a nice fancy dinner, all 8 of us. And then Summit 2011, we had a nice little hotel weekend. And this was this year in San Francisco. We're already much bigger than this, which is crazy. But the whole point is that you get people meeting in real life. And especially if your whole life is sort of dictated by chatting with people and seeing their little gravatar, it's really easy to say, no, I don't really care about what you're thinking, whatever. But if you ever actually talk to somebody in person, you make that personal connection, you can get a better understanding of like, well, if I do what I'm planning to do, I may actually screw this guy's life up a lot more. He may have to deal with more support tickets, or he may have to deal with the code fallout if I do this feature. So it really changes your opinion on how you work with your fellow employees. So it's really important, even though we try to eschew face-to-face meetings, if you have very structured face-to-face meetings, they can be extremely productive. Also, GitHub's really attention aware. Again, we want to get people in the zone as much as possible. We want to get people really happy, really productive, building really good code. And the problem with anything where you're pulling out of the zone is it all comes from distractions. So we try to minimize distractions as much as possible. Everyone has that experience where you're tapping away on code and you're really into it, and then you feel that tapping on your shoulder, and you're sort of talking to them, and you're still trying to tap and get into it, and then you have to talk to them some more, and then you get them to buzz off, and then you get back to it, and you're like, you totally missed your flow. And then it takes you 5, 10, 15 minutes to get back to where you were. Like, that sucks. It takes a long time to get back into this sort of stuff. So we try to minimize these distractions as much as possible. One way we do this is we have no technical meetings, we have no stand-up meetings, we have no daily planning meetings, anything like that. Partially because not everyone's in the office, partially because I don't think they're that productive. We can do all this stuff over chat. We also try to minimize in-person distractions. So again, if we're in the same office, rather than me going over and talking to you, I'll just ping you over chat. And usually everyone has like a window that will pop up, and you can ignore that, and it's perfectly cool to ignore that if you're in the middle of work. And it's sort of accepted that I'll get back to you when I'm totally done and ready with what I've been working on right now, and that's great. We also have no managers. We're at 83 employees right now, and we still have no managers, which I think is phenomenal. I think managers are very distracting. I apologize for any managers in the audience. And I think for all of this stuff, we're sort of a special case, and I realize that. And we can work this way for a number of different reasons. One, we're a product company. Whenever I give a talk similar to this, usually the question at the end of this, somebody raises their hands and says, how can I do this in my consultancy? And I'm like, you can't. That's sort of the trade-offs between being a product company and working for somebody else. That we have full control over our product and we can build it as we see fit. That's really powerful. Secondly, we dog food GitHub all the time. We're our #1 users. Far before you guys get upset about something, we're usually upset about it. We know what part of GitHub we don't like, what part of GitHub we really like, and all of the above. So that gives us a different perspective and allows people to sort of work on what they want when they want. We also have full ownership. We never took VC, so we have entire control of the company. We don't have to answer to anybody who wants us to do some weird, wacky thing. And on top of that, we've been profitable since day one, basically. And if you've ever been in a company where your runway is measured in months, that completely changes your idea of what you need to do today versus what you need to do long term. And we can focus on the long term and focus on what makes a really good product. But really, I think every company is different. And I think the main point of what I'm trying to say is that you have to analyze what can you do, what makes sense for your company. Maybe that's totally different from how we do it. And I think it's important to sort of reanalyze yourself and figure out how you can change this as much as possible. Because before long, if you've missed out on your opportunity, by the time you realize that you have missed out on it, it's far too late to change anything. Beyond that, as we've grown, I mean, I was employee number 9, and now, again, we're at 83. So I've seen how we've grown over time. Like many other companies, we've sort of become much more team-oriented over the years. We have lots of different teams now, different native teams, different software teams, and obviously this is great. This is sort of the standard way of attacking different things. Small teams let us move really quickly and independently, and we basically let teams be in charge of whatever the product they're going to do. It's sort of the startup within a startup feeling where they are in charge of like the marketing, the direction, the long-term goals of the product, whatever the case may be, and it's really good to let them have the power to do that. We're able to do this practically through a lot of different ways. Mainly, we have different chat rooms for every single product, every single team that we have. So the danger room is sort of where you put funny cat pictures and animated GIFs, because you got to have one of those. If you don't have one of these in your company, I highly recommend it. It's amazing. We also have a room for serious talk. We have a room for the enterprise team who works on like our enterprise product, design team, support team, all of these different rooms where you can have focused conversations just on that product and just with that team. So if you ever have a question, you can go over to that room and have a discussion based specifically on that. Small teams let you focus, and that's mostly what we're trying to do here, is that you can break up your focus and then let them focus on what really matters. And then finally, like, one of the coolest things that I really like about GitHub is we are a very minimal process. I think there's a lot of us at GitHub that really hates process of all kinds, and we end up doing a lot of things to sort of combat process all steps of the way. So the question at this point is sort of, how do we let people actually do all this stuff? And it's sort of a simple answer, is that we let people plan it, build it, and then ship it. So how do we actually do all that? So in the planning stage, if you have an idea for anything that you're interested in doing, you basically show it as soon as possible. As long as you get somebody to look at it quickly, that's good. So we do this through chat. We have screenshots. People paste in all the time. The design room is especially great. Our designers will post in like, man, what if this page looked like this? And then at that point, everyone can say, yeah, that's great, work on it. No, that's horrible, change this or do this. And it's good to get that feedback as soon as possible on what people want changed. We also use pull requests substantially. This is our form of code review. And I'll get into this a little bit later. We also have a number of wikis and internal apps to help us sort of align our ideas together. And I'll talk about this briefly. But in general, the whole point of this is to make sure that it is okay to say no. Both on the sides of me saying no to your idea, but you on the sides of accepting somebody to say no on your idea. And that's sort of easier said than done at some point. You don't want to get in the case where if I say no to something, where you take that personally or anything like that. And I think we sort of have developed a culture where we can say no to a lot of things and keep very focused perspective on things. And that's totally fine. And if you really think that, you know, I'm totally wrong in saying no, you can say, well, I think you're wrong, and here's why. And then that sort of debate and argument is really good to have inside of a company. I was talking about sort of internal projects and stuff before. This is one of them. This is GitHub Team, which is sort of our project management stuff. Everybody contributes to it. I mean everybody. We have a lot of non-technical people, HR people, who contribute to Team. And that's good because we can get ideas on interesting things. We can see status updates. We sort of use this as an internal Twitter. If you want to post a picture of something you're working on, it's kind of a nice way of saying, hey, check this out, getting people excited about it, get people to help you out on whatever you're building. We can also sort of avoid abandonment. We had a concept of projects in here where you could say like, you know, I'm working on this, I need some help, and you can corral everybody in to sort of help you out. Since we sort of have a decentralized way of making products where, you know, if I want to make something, I can build the back end, and then I sort of have to recruit a designer to help work on it with me. So it's sort of from there, you sort of vote with your work, where if you think an idea is really good, join them on it, but you can't just say, yeah, I think we should do that, and then just sort of ignore it yourself and not work on it. So when we move from the planning stage onto the building stage, you sort of have to look on how you actually build it. And one of the biggest foundations of this is how you branch code, how you build your code, how you actually ship your code. And I've done a lot of support and stuff like that to large enterprisey companies, and it's weird what people think is good branching strategies for Git, Subversion, CVS, whatever the case may be. We tend to use Git, but in general, it's just strange how people put all these different permission structures and stuff on top of repositories, and it gets really confusing. So this is what we do. We use Git, obviously. We have our master branch in Git. Branch off of that if you ever want to do a bug report, or a bug fix, or a feature, or anything like that. And then you send a pull request, and then you merge it back in. Like, this is it. The whole point is that it's very simple. And part of the reason behind this is that it's very designer-friendly, and by that I mean non-technical. We do hire people who don't know Git as well as we do, and we still want them to feel like they can understand the concept behind getting their code into production as fast as possible. We try to have somebody ship into production either the first day or first week of employment, because we think it's really good to sort of get people as soon as possible doing real stuff, rather than waiting months and months and months before their first contribution to the company. This is also good for us because we can do really simple rollbacks. If we do everything on like a branch for a bug fix, we can quickly roll back. This is important for us because we can deploy 30, 40, 50 times a day. So when you're doing that sort of stuff, if you deploy a branch to production, you can quickly roll back through a bunch of different ways. We can do partial deploys. We can deploy the code base just to our staff, so let our staff bang on it for a little bit. You can deploy to specific servers. You can deploy to specific processes on specific servers. And the whole thing is to limit our exposure in case a bug gets out there or something breaks or something unforeseen happens. And this is all sort of helped because we have a very simple, basic branching strategy at our base. We don't have to go through some really complicated QA system or anything complicated like that. I mentioned earlier that we use pull requests substantially, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. In general, I've worked at a few companies where you project code on a wall, and you sort of go through line by line saying like, yeah, is this good? Is this horrible? What do we want to do here? And that's, if you're ever doing that, it is the worst thing in the world. And I think that's bad. That's code review, I guess, but it's a horrible code review. And we sort of eschew all of that, and we do everything in pull requests. In general, pull requests are basically discussions about code. You push a branch up to GitHub, and then you can discuss that branch before it goes in production. And we do this for everything. We do this for stuff that is one commit and changes like one line of one file just because that line is really important and we want people's feedback on that particular change. And we do this over a period of months. We've had some pull requests that have been alive for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, active at certain points, and had dozens of people contributing to it because it was a really big change, or it was a really long change, or it had a lot of copy change, or whatever the case may be. It's a really nice way of getting all this discussion together and correlating it with code from there. The general workflow is you push a branch up, you get feedback on it, you're making improvements, you push code back to that pull request and let it grow, then you merge that branch back in. Again, it's a very simple flow. It's something that somebody can figure out on their first day. You don't have to go through a QA department. You don't have to go through anything like that. And it's a nice way to do it. It's very asynchronous. It's non-invasive, meaning I don't have to go over to your desk and tap on your shoulder and say, hey, can you review this code so I can push to production? I can just make my pull request, and then your email will pop up. You know, Zach has made a pull request. Can you check it out? And we tend to do it based on, you know, I've been involved in the billing code, therefore I should check out the billing pull requests. Or, you know, your area of the company, you should review those pull requests. It's sort of a responsibility type of thing. They're very extremely visible for your organization. So if I do a pull request, again, it gets sent out an email to everybody in the organization, but it also shows up on your dashboard, it shows up in the pull requests page. All that sort of stuff makes it very accessible to everybody. There's a nice one-click merge button if you don't want to deal with all of the Git silliness in merging stuff. And then again, this sort of replaces our traditional code review. And I think that's really big. When you move from a sort of structured code review into letting people review stuff on their own time, where you don't have to pull yourselves away from whatever project you're working on, that becomes incredibly important. Then once you ship it, just quickly, we spend a lot of time on our test suite. We sort of consider fast tests to be really good, especially if we're deploying code, you know, the dozens of times we do a day. We want tests to be really quick. So at this point, our test suite is something like 14,000 assertions in 200 seconds, which is still way too slow. We'd like this to be even faster, but you know, it's important that the code you push is also fast in terms of tests. We sort of have a viewpoint of a slow test as a regression. So if you push something that slows down the test suite a lot, you know, that's almost as bad as pushing a bug to production. The faster you can have a test run, the faster you can push to production, the faster you can move as a company. And that becomes really awesome. Our test suite has actually gotten faster as we've grown with more and more people, which is kind of amazing to me. So in general, I don't think you need distractions. I think it's kind of bad. Any sort of physical presence required is just tricky. You don't need to be in the same country, and you don't need a lot of process. This is sort of one of those things where people default to throwing process at the problem when something else smarter could do. The number of stories I've heard from friends where somebody pushes a bad build to production, and then at that point everything blows up, and then the bosses say, okay, now we got to have QA, now we got to have write-off, we got to have sign-off, we got to do all these things. That's just really depressing. It should be much more accepting. If you push to production a bug, fix the bug, and then move on. Figure out how you can build better code from that point on. You don't have to layer process on top of it. It slows you down. It makes for a better or a worse product overall. Finally, I want to talk about sort of an internal thing that we say at GitHub is optimizing for happiness. And this is one of the most important things at GitHub as well. GitHub, when we started out, just a couple people in 2008, and then 2009 we added a few more, 2010 we added a few more. This was last year, and then this was last month. We've grown dramatically over the last few years for a startup, and that's really great. Adding people is always a good thing. We're at 83 employees right now, but that's not the number that's interesting. The really fascinating number for GitHub is that we've never had anybody leave. And that is phenomenal considering we are in the computing industry in general, and we're in Silicon Valley on top of that. Like, I've heard stories of people jumping from company to company every 6 months because they can just get their salary raised 10% every single job they get, just because they had a salary at the last company, right? So people tend to jump around companies a lot, and I think it's really horrible because no one really understands how much of a problem that is. Like, if you lose somebody, you lose all of their institutional knowledge, which sucks. But then it takes weeks or months to try and find somebody to replace them, and it takes weeks or months for that person to come up to speed to where they're at, where the person that you lost their knowledge was at. And that really sucks to lose people. So we try to figure out ways to mitigate that. How do we sort of imprison people into happiness where they never ever want to leave GitHub, you know? And we come up with a number of different ways to do that. So in general, how do we make a happiness-oriented workplace is what I'm trying to say. Most of the time people leave because of burnout, at least from what I've seen. Sometimes people leave for like better job opportunities, stuff like that, but a lot of the times people just get really burnt out on whatever they're doing. And there are lots of ways where we can sort of combat that. One is exploration, letting people sort of explore their own boundaries. 2 is letting them have a lot of freedom, and then 3 is having a lot of self-direction in your job. So in terms of exploration, we do this in a number of different ways. We have lots of shared side projects at GitHub, and this is really kind of fun. I don't know if any of you guys know Hubot. Hubot's our chat room robot who sits in all of our chat rooms and we can talk to him. He sort of began as a kind of a weird thing, and you can have him do funny stuff like put mustaches on images, find animated GIFs and all these memes and all of that silly stuff. But we also have built lots of crazy stuff into him too. Like, he deploys our entire site. So a designer on his first day can type Hubot deploy GitHub to production, and then that deploys it to all of our 50, 60 some servers, restarts the correct processes, does all the code checkout, compiles our assets. There's a whole laundry list of stuff that it does, but he doesn't have to worry about that. He just has to type Hubot deploy to production, and that's it. You can do tons of shell commands. All of our graphing is done through Hubot. There's lots of really real business stuff we do through Hubot as well. But the whole point here is that it's a shared side project that we can all sort of hack on. He's written in JavaScript, so he's accessible to people who, JavaScript's sort of the glue language between lots of people, who may know like Windows technologies versus, PHP or Ruby or whatever the case may be. So it's much more accessible for our designers and developers to work on him. And we sort of encourage this where, man, if you're really burnt out on whatever project you're working on, even though that may be a really interesting project, sometimes you just want to like fart around for half a day and say, man, I want Hubot to return smart aleck responses if I ask him about, I don't know, World War II or something like that. And that's good. If it makes it really interesting culture-wise for the rest of the company, that's cool. Because not only will there be hopefully something interesting coming out of your hacking on this side project, but it also puts you in a better place mentally and emotionally, where you can say, man, I'm just going to work on something fun and easy and interesting and something that sort of challenges me as a person. We also have a ton of different internal apps. This is from Help, which is our sort of help/support system. And this all stemmed from one of our support guys is like, man, I really hate our support system. I'm going to build this sort of like sort of an app that sort of manages my queues a lot better. And then a few months later, someone came by and was like, hey, this is cool. I want to make it look pretty. And then before we knew it, like 4 or 5 months later, just on the side, we had this amazing support site. And this is great because now all of our support people can use Help, and it totally changes their lives. Like, it literally makes them more productive, more happy to work for us. So by going out of your way and saying, I'm not going to work on my normal job today, I'm going to work on some internal app, you're helping yourself because you're splitting up the grind of working on normal work stuff, but you're also helping the rest of the company work better at their own jobs. We also do a lot of just weird stuff like hardware hacking. This is a iPod Touch connected to flat screens in our office because somebody said one day, hey, I want to be able to push random URLs to TV screens around the office. So somebody made an iOS app, very cheap. You can buy iPod Touches pretty cheap, connected to a TV, and now from Hubot you can say, Hubot, push this URL to this particular TV, and then you can put nice, our load graphs or something on that particular TV or whatever the case may be. This is also really cool because even if you're not in the office, I know one of our sysadmins in Japan had his iPad next to his screen with all of the load graphs and stuff using this app. So because we sort of built this the way we did, now he can get all of his graphs and feel like he's getting sort of the office experience just from sitting at home. And that's sort of an unintended good side effect that came from this. So we encourage a lot of that stuff as well. We also have something called Play. We're kind of a weird, eclectic musical group at GitHub. A lot of us are artists, so we have music playing all the time, which is kind of awesome. The challenge is how do you control who plays what on the speakers? So we built sort of a DJ app where you can request, again, through Hubot Play, Daft Punk, and then I'll queue up 10 Daft Punk tracks and then play over the speakers, and that's great. And again, since we don't want this to be just office only, we stream this for all of the other employees to listen to at home. It seems sort of stupid maybe, but it's actually, I was skeptical at first, but as soon as like something comes on, like Garth Brooks comes on, and then everyone's like, what the hell is playing? And then people start talking about it. It's sort of, you mitigate that experience of being, remote, basically, where you can say like, man, we're listening to the same thing across the world, and it's kind of amazing. It's, bringing people together. So stuff like that's kind of fun. We encourage people to work on these shared side projects because it brings people together in sort of interesting ways that they wouldn't otherwise. And it keeps people fresh when you're actually building on these fun things. Beyond that, we encourage people to broaden their horizons intellectually. We buy Kindles and we'll give out ebooks to everybody in the company as well. A couple months ago, we got React books for everybody in the company because people wanted to learn React. Not necessarily we're going to use it in production, although we do, but it's good to get people sort of trying out new technologies just because it keeps people fresh, keeps people interested in new solutions. A while ago, people wanted to hack on Arduino. If you're not familiar, Arduino is just open source hardware hacking, which is great, especially for a lot of the designers, a lot of people who are only in the software world who have never done hardware hacking before. We had somebody come in and sort of let people build little tiny gizmos and stuff. That was awesome, very different from the normal day-to-day job, and you're sort of getting a different perspective on different kinds of programming, different kinds of technology. And then somebody wanted to learn Spanish, so we brought in a Spanish tutor. And eventually the dude went and gave a talk in Spanish somewhere in a Spanish-speaking country, which is the craziest thing I've ever heard, and frightening. And then beyond that, like, along the lines of like broadening your horizons intellectually, we encourage a lot of networking. If you get accepted to speak anywhere in the world, GitHub will send you and a travel buddy, another employee of GitHub, to go there. Because it's important to sort of get out there and see new things. One, it's really good marketing for us, obviously, I guess. Your talk is probably good, unless your talk is horrible. And then we'll usually sponsor drink-ups in the city so you can meet people locally and sort of, just enjoy socializing with people. And meeting people is sort of the best part of all this. One, you can like hire them, and we do hire lots of people that we meet in conferences and drink-ups and stuff like that, just because it's a nice atmosphere to meet people in. But in general, socializing is really fun. Especially, like because of this sort of stuff, I've been sent to really weird conferences that I never would have otherwise. Like strange Java conferences in the middle of like rural, random countries. And it's phenomenal because I end up catching these talks that like I'll never use in my day-to-day work, but just being there, it gives you a different perspective on things. It sort of grows your mind. You get to talk to people about different technologies that you wouldn't otherwise and sort of compare notes on how things are going. And again, you're trying to minimize burnout with, working the same stuff all the time. If you can sort of encourage people to get out of their comfort zone and do some stuff like this, that's really awesome. So burnout happens when you're not personally growing. I really think that's an important thing for GitHub, is that we try desperately to try and make people sort of grow themselves throughout their employment. Beyond that, we try to give employees a lot of freedom as well. I mentioned earlier we have no set hours, partially because we couldn't in terms of international employees. I wouldn't know what hours we would set where people would have to wake up at like 3 in the morning, something insane like that. We have no managers. We have no meetings as well, which is great. There's basically no need to be in the office. We have a lot of San Francisco people who actually don't go to the office because they're just not productive there. When it's time to ship the really impressive code that they want to push out that day, they go to a cafe because the cafe is where they're most productive. That's not me. That is crazy to me, but we want to support that. We want people to be productive wherever they are. And then on top of that, we have no vacation tracking or anything like that, which is just another small thing of saying, we trust you to make smart decisions on how you treat your time. And between those last two things, you don't have to be in the office and you can sort of take vacations whenever you can. We encourage people to sort of travel all over the place. A lot of us shared a ski condo last year with a whole bunch of different GitHubbers just so we could go ski and then hack from the ski mountain, which is great. Just a change in venue is really healthy sometimes. And then finally, just self-direction. Giving people a sense that they actually have power in what they do is really important. We let people work on things that interest them. They can basically work on, they choose on what they want to work on. And that is really kind of rare. We don't really have bosses that say, all right, now Joe, work on this, and Nancy, work on this, and you have to do this by this and this date. We don't really have deadlines at all either, because we don't trust people to work on something and be done with it when it's ready. And again, we have teams, but our teams are set up so they're very easy to move around. And that's the problem with teams if they're very structured where you can't get out of them. If I want to bounce around on the enterprise team for a week because that's interesting to me or they need my help with some particular problem that they're facing, I should feel totally fine to do that. That's actually exactly what I do at GitHub now. I started out working on GitHub firewall install, and it was just me for a year and a half. And now we have a team of about 15 people doing the job I was doing, which makes me feel amazing. But before that point, I was just kind of burnt out. And I talked to the founders about this, and like, yeah, just work on something else. So I'm off that team now, and it's just totally, I'm not burnt out anymore, and I can sort of drift in when I want to work on that. And it's great that you can sort of move around, and it totally changes your perspective on, feeling trapped inside of a company. So in general, just keep your employees really, really, really happy. Think about what works in your situation. What do your employees value? Is there anything that you can do differently today that can change things? So in conclusion, just be flexible about stuff. Be flexible at hours. Be flexible about requirements, process, anything like that. Build a company you want to work for. And again, I want to stress that I don't think this is a founder thing necessarily. I don't think this is a manager thing. I think this is sort of the most change can come from sort of the lowliest employee, where they can just say, well, okay, what can I change in my day-to-day? What can I mention to people that maybe we could structure our company differently where something is more interesting to work for, where we can get people really excited to come into work. And then finally, just push for happiness. I don't know why we would do this stuff unless it didn't make us happy. We're in the most insane industry in the world, where we can build stuff out of our minds and then push code and then make money on it. It's amazing. So thanks.